Here we go, episode 3. And in this episode, I am taking advantage of some time that I have to clean out my truck and prepare it for its initial walk around video that Mike from Last Line of Defense YouTube channel is going to do on it. So I had to pull all my gear out of the back seat area, vacuum it, clean it, get all 15,000 miles worth of road dirt out of the truck, and load the e-bike back on, and somehow make it all fit in the back. Now, my plan was to head from Wyoming to Colorado to meet up with Mike, and that's exactly what I was doing. But as often happens, when I hit the road, there was a change of plans. So if you want to see what that change was, you're going to want to sit back, you're going to want to relax, and you're going to want to check this out. Before we start this video, I'm going to ask you to hit that subscribe button and don't forget to hit the little notification bell so you're notified of all new videos. Here we go. So here we are. It is a Friday night. It is around 10 past 8 and the sun is behind those clouds way over there. And that is Route 80 right behind me. I am halfway from where I was in Wyoming to Ouray, Colorado, which is my next stop. I believe this video is going to be comparing this built 4Runner to the built Land Cruiser and doing the same trails and seeing if this thing can handle it as easily as the Land Cruiser did. Granted, the Land Cruiser had 3 more inches of lift. It had a solid front axle, and it had 37s, not 35s. But I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to run it through its paces, bring it to Imogene, bring it to Poughkeepsie Gulch, and, just see if this thing can do it. She got plenty of power. I made sure of that. She got plenty of suspension. I made sure of that. But she's definitely got some weight. She's heavy. But I mean, I've been living at it for 2.5 months as we stand right now. So everything that's on this truck, I need on this truck. Camera gear, laptops, refrigerator, supplies, etc. So it is what it is. But for those that say they envy the life, let me tell you something. Let's take a look at where I am right now. I'm on an Indian reservation right next to Route 80. And it's windy, so I pointed the truck into the wind. It's wide open all the way around me. 18-wheelers. Looks like we got a couple of Gazelle over there. But this is not fancy. This ain't a hotel. I don't mind the highway. I don't mind the trucks driving by. That don't bother me none. So heading to Colorado was the plan. But the more I thought about it, I know that Mike has to be at the Overland Expo West in a couple of days, and me showing up was going to leave him tight. And I didn't want to do that. He just got married. He's got obligations. So I settled in for the night, and when I woke up, I decided to head to the Bonneville Salt Flats because I was already in Utah, and why not? I love the night sky there. It's good for astrophotography. So when I woke up, that was the direction I headed in. Now, for those that may have been living under a rock, in 2019, Mike from Last Line of Defense not only bought his first Land Cruiser, but he did a walk-around video of my Land Cruiser. So I thought it was only appropriate to reach out and ask him to do the initial walk-around of my supercharged 4Runner, and he agreed. But, again, that's going to be on hold for a week or two. So in the morning, I wrapped up the truck, I buttoned her up, I turned the wheels west, and I headed to the Salt Flats. Now, if you've never been there, it's a long, flat drive. Not too much to do except wait for the next gas station, which is probably going to be about 150 miles away, so make sure you carry spare fuel. Because the Salt Flats are right on the Utah-Nevada border, the closer you get, the more signs you get for girls, 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 and casinos. And they've got plenty of both. Not so much on the girls because it's pretty hot out there. But the one thing I noticed was it appeared to be raining in Utah, which is a strange thing. Okay, so in season 1 of Overland Journal, in a couple of episodes, I had mentioned a strange thing. That every time I pass through Utah, somehow rain comes with me. Well, currently I'm in Utah, and it just started, well, raining. It is such an odd thing. I don't know how to explain it. Every time I come to Utah, it rains. I find that odd. That's all. So I made my way into town, grabbed a few supplies, and then planned on heading out into the Salt Flats for the night. Now, usually when you camp at the Bonneville Salt Flats, you can hear engines and turbines running and racing day and night as people test their machines that they've built out on the Salt Flats. But because of the weather, the Salt Flats have been flooded for what turns out to be a couple or several weeks. I'm not exactly sure, but they were unusable. So it was eerily quiet, deathly quiet. I tucked my truck into this little canyon right here, so I was shielded from the wind and shaded from the sun and settled in for the night. Now, if you've never camped out here in the Salt Flat Desert, it's a very strange place because distance is very, very difficult to gauge. Now, I was an infantryman in the United States Army, and I took a few classes training on mileage, distance, etc., etc. But as the years have passed, I've kind of lost those skills a little bit, thanks to GPS, cell phones, etc. But whatever. It's very difficult to gauge how far you are away from something, and out here it's crazy because what you think was a mile turns out to be 10 miles. What you think is 1,000 feet turns out to be 3 miles. It's a strange thing, and it got me good a couple of times. So with the high-speed test out of the equation, I set the truck up for the night and occupied my time by looking at different rocks that are all over the area. They're otherworldly. They look like rocks like you've never seen before. Also, in the foothills, I noticed a cave, and it didn't look to be too far away, so I figured I'd hike over there, take a look, see if there was any bats or owls or snakes or whatever. So this is one of those walks where it looks like it's about half a mile away, and it isn't. It's really, really far and uphill to boot. But from down at my truck, it looked like there was a little cave up here, or a couple of caves. And I figured right before it got dark, I'd go have a look-see. I've been walking for 20 minutes. Now, the entire terrain is riddled with scorpion holes, marks from sidewinders, all sorts of little things you find in the desert that sting and bite and kill people. So you have to keep your eye on the sagebrush. You have to be very careful where you walk. And so often you don't see anything, you could get lazy. But you shouldn't, because getting bit by a snake out here, you're all alone. Well, I'm all alone. I do have snake bite kits, etc. with me, but you still don't want to get bit by a snake because it would suck. And when the night comes, so don't the scorpions, bats, and burrowing owls. And it was pretty awesome. But when I got there, it was 90 degrees. By nightfall, it dropped down to about 75, so it was reasonable. But I had to hit the road as soon as I woke up because with the salt flats flooded, there was no reason to hang around out here in the desert, and I certainly wasn't gambling. So I packed up my truck and I headed west into Nevada. After driving for what seemed like forever on a completely flat highway for the longest time, I mean, the mountains on the side were golden. They were beautiful. They looked much like the mountains you find in California, but they were in Nevada. I stopped several times to get gasoline, and at one point noticed something very strange on the side of the road. Now, all over these long desert highways, you'll see old dilapidated buildings, stores, auto repair garages, etc. But this one was different, and I had to go over and take a peek. Even though the temperature was pushing 100 degrees and there was nobody around, I stumbled upon what turned out to be the Thunder Mountain Monument, something I had never heard of in my life. And like so many other spots that I've stumbled upon, this one was out in the middle of nowhere, and it was just a stroke of luck I happened to notice it. There's nothing around other than this monument. It takes up about, I'd have to say, an acre or 2 acres of land, and it is the most unusual thing that I've ever seen, ever. It's a cross between a deserted pirate ship, a junkyard, an old military fortress, and a house of horrors type thing. It's very hard to explain, and it's been here for a long time. So I'm going to tell you the story behind it and the guys that built it. Or should I say the guy that built it? The guy that built it was a guy named Frank Van Zandt, and this is him pictured right here. And this is a picture of him with his son back in the early days. And his son, after his father passed away, now maintains the place, and his name is Dan Van Zandt. Now this place is built out of copious amounts of concrete, timber, wrecked automobiles, and other oddities, things that were found on the side of the road, etc. And this is basically a monument to the Native American people and the plight of Manifest Destiny and some of the other horrific atrocities that occurred to the Native American people. Now, I'm an American, and I'm a veteran, and all the males in my family were veterans of one war or another. We're proud to be an American, but having a little bit of Blackfoot Indian in my bloodstream might make me sympathetic to the plight of the Native Americans. They always said that Christopher Columbus found this country. Well, when he found this country, it wasn't lost. It already belonged to a lot of Native Americans, and sadly, they were pretty much exterminated or relegated to small reservations in the harshest parts of the United States of America. And then some, fortunately, found their way into the casino industry. Others, I've met them firsthand in Navajo Nation, places all over the country. They're not so lucky. They're living in incredibly harsh environments, living off government stipends, and alcohol and drugs. It's sad. At any rate, on to the history. Enough of my commentary. So we're going to start out with the only information I could find, which is off of their website. And yes, Thunder Mountain has a website, and links will be below. The website starts with Daniel Van Zandt, the son of the man that actually built this. Frank Van Zandt is a middle-aged desk jockey who, when he's not developing marketing strategies for an Oregon supermarket chain, can be found scraping bird droppings from the concrete statuary in the high desert of northern Nevada. It's a strange way to spend one vacation, he readily admits. Then again, just about everything around him is a tad strange. Van Zandt is owner and caretaker of Thunder Mountain Monument. 5 acres jam-packed with exotic folk art and architectural oddities that his late father created over a period of 30 years beside Interstate 80 in Pershing County. Frank Van Zant, also known as Chief Rolling Mountain Thunder, described his roadside art project variously as a museum, a monument to the American Indian, a retreat for pilgrims aspiring to the pure and radiant heart. Many of his neighbors feared Van Zant, others revered him as a spiritual guru. Isn't that always the way? He had a charismatic personality that could have made him another Jim Jones, declared Chief Thunder's affable eldest son. Frank Dean Van Zant was born in Okmulgee, Oklahoma on November 11, 1921. Okmulgee is Indian country, and although his surname is Dutch, Van Zant considered himself a full-blooded member of the Creek Nation. He left home at the age of 14 and enlisted in the Civilian Conservation Corps, where he picked up pocket change and a variety of skills that would provide useful in later years. After World War II broke out, Frank enlisted in the Army Air Corps, but had to drop out because flying made him sick to his stomach, so he transferred into the Tank Corps, serving with the 7th Armored Division in the 7 major campaigns in the European theater. Years later, Frank would tell a reporter from the Los Angeles Times that he had been nearly blown apart by a German bazooka. Dan Van Zant can't confirm the story. He says his father didn't much like to talk about the war. Like a lot of veterans, you try to get him to talk and he'd shut up pretty quick. But it changed him. It definitely changed him. Because in talking to my grandmother, she says that he came back from the war a totally different man. Upon returning to civilian life, Frank studied theology for about a year and a half, intending to become a man of the cloth. He was going to be a Methodist minister, and was actually an assistant pastor for a while, Dan recalls. But then he saw the hypocrisy and didn't want to have anything to do with it. Didn't want to be part of it. Van Zant dropped out of divinity school and traded in his Bible for a badge. Law enforcement suited him, and for 2 decades he served as sheriff's deputy in Sutter County, working out of Yuba City, California. In 1960, he ran for the office of sheriff, but narrowly lost. He embarked on a second career as a private investigator, a vocation he pursued until he retired. Remarried for the 3rd time and set out for rural Nevada, where he would become reincarnated as Chief Rolling Thunder Mountain. Why such a radical change, of course, in midlife? Printed accounts vary. Frank himself offered a variety of explanations, depending on who was asking the question and how much he felt like answering them. In one version, he said he had a dream one night that a great big eagle swooped down from the sky and told him, "This is where I should build his nest." Another account has Frank and his young bride, Atram, heading west in the fall of 1968, looking to find a place in the sun. 130 miles northeast of Reno, near a one-time railroad station called Imlay, his 1946 Chevy pickup broke down. He couldn't get it running again, and so decided to set up a camp in the sagebrush. Presently, the owner of the property happened along and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. What inspired Frank to start building his Thunder Mountain monument? According to Dan, when his father was young, he once seen a bottle house out in the desert, someplace around Death Valley, and he just fell in love with it. And he said he wanted to do that someday. Van Zant's 3-story monument started out as a 1-room travel trailer, which he gradually rocked over until it came to resemble Barney Rubble's Stone Age bungalow. As materials became available, he added corridors, stairways leading to upstairs bedrooms formed of daub and bottle walls and slate ceilings. He turned automobile windshields into picture windows, scrap iron and galvanized pipe into rebar, concrete and chicken wire into ornamental statuary. Virtually every square foot of the monument's exterior is covered with friezes and bas-relief tableaus depicting historic massacres and/or bureaucratic betrayals visited upon the American Indian. The roof is adorned with still more statues and multiple arches, the tallest of which soars 50 feet into the sky. At the very top is perched a carved wood eagle, which only recently was restored to perpendicular by a courageous local, Jim Lacey. Even as the monument was under construction, it was joined by various crazy cat outbuildings, including the roundhouse in the Hostel House, a 40 by 60 foot work shed, an underground hut, guest cabins, and a quixotic children's playground straight out of Tim Burton's movie. Soon, Thunder Mountain became a popular hangout for hippie artisans and counterculture characters, much on the order of Meta Tante commune established in East Carlin by the Cherokee medicine man John Rolling Thunder Pope. During the late 60s and early 70s, interest in living the Indian way ran high, and there was more dropout disciples and vision questers roaming about northern Nevada than just one Chief Thunder could accommodate. Was transcendental medication part of the Imlay scene? Dan Van Zant insists that his father was opposed to mind-altering drugs and wouldn't permit the use on the grounds. Instead, the chief architect of Thunder Mountain appeared to be fueled by tobacco and caffeine and driven by forces even his closest of kin couldn't fathom. "Oh yeah, I thought the old man had slipped a cog," said Dan Van Zant. "That's why I questioned what he was doing, why he was doing this, wanting to start all over with raising a family and building a monument in the middle of nowhere. But that's what he wanted to do, and he didn't want to live alone. He wasn't the type of personality that could not be around people. I think he enjoyed being around people. He could never be a hermit." As the 1970s drew to a close and the political pendulum began to swing to the right, Thunder Mountain fell into disrepair. In 1983, the three-story hostel house burned to the ground, then the underground hut caved in. By and by, the last of the hippie artisan drifted back to suburbia. Finally, Frank's wife left him, taking with her the couple's 3 young children. The Thunder family patriarch found himself alone, with no one for company save concrete likenesses of Quetzalcoatl, Standing Bear, Sarah Winnemucca, and his beloved son Sid, who had died at the age of 19. His health failing, the result of a lifelong addiction to cigarettes, Van Zant became increasingly depressed. On January 5, 1989, he penned a farewell note to his son Dan. The chief lay down on a sofa in the roundhouse and put a bullet through his brain. Thunder Mountain became deserted. Although curious visitors continued to trickle in off the freeway, as did more than a few vandals, nocturnal thrill seekers would belay themselves down the chimney into the monument's main chamber, where they would drink beer and tell ghost stories. Water was also invading the structure, thanks to the porous roof. Piece by piece, Frank Van Zant's monument to the American Indian was going the way of the buffalo and the carrier pigeon. Although his father had willed him the property in his suicide note, it took a while for Dan Van Zant to gain legal custody. His next goal was to somehow preserve and protect the place. But how? "My first thoughts were that I would just donate to the state of Nevada," Dan says. "They could make it into a state park." And a person who was director of the State Parks Division actually came out, met with me, and walked through the property. He was basically pretty candid. He just said, "This place is a mess." Dan Van Zant and his wife Margie have since hauled away a couple hundred pickup loads of trash, what his father would have called building material. "It's what he used to use," Dan says. "He had it scattered around so he could see what he had." Today, the boneyard is confined to just 400 square feet area with the west wall of the burned-down hostel house, and Dan estimates there's enough fused lumber in the pile to build a visitor center. He'd also like to install an underground irrigation system so he can keep the shade trees alive and green up the grounds. Green it up, put in some park benches, picnic tables, and make it a little bit more appealing to the general public, all of which would take time, and not to mention money. For that, the proprietor of Thunder Mountain relies solely on the kindest of strangers. one of whom, after taking a tour of the grounds, mailed Dan a check for $20,000. A large chunk of cash went towards replacing the leaky roof, a smaller chunk towards casting a bronze plaque honoring the munificent benefactor. Dan regards the $20,000 contribution as nothing short of a miracle, one of the many said to have occurred upon the patch of land his father held sacred. Once back when the monument was fully occupied by improvident hippie artisans, there arose a food shortage. The story goes that the chief did an Indian dance and offered up a prayer. Later that same day, a semi-trailer truck loaded with frozen food crashed on the highway. The driver, grateful to be alive, told the group to help themselves to the spilled groceries. Frank Van Zant never planned too far ahead, preferring to rely on the divine providence. His son Dan, confident that the Great Spirit still abides at Thunder Mountain, is determined to see that his father's life work will not soon fade away. As you walk through this monument, or this park, whatever you want to call it, you can feel the spirits of the fallen Indians. There's faces incorporated into the concrete and into the structure, looking in all directions. And I'd have to imagine that Frank's still there, taking his own life at this property. I'm guessing will lock him there for eternity. It'd be sad to see this piece of America simply be wiped away. There's more than enough there to restore, but it's in a very inhospitable area. But I found my way there, whether it was chance, whether it was providence, as I often do, and I recorded what I saw. And if it's just for posterity, so be it. So according to their website, that's all the information I could find. But I'll tell you what, when you go there, there is a makeshift entranceway with a donation booth, and I donated, as everybody should, because this was some man's dream, and this meant a lot. This was a memorial to the hundreds of thousands of people that lived in North America before we showed up, and were murdered and killed and raped and fooled and turned into prisoners of alcohol and drugs. I don't mean to end the video like this, but it is what it is. I've seen this face to face. I've been on every Indian reservation in the United States. And for all of those that suddenly became wealthy in the casino business, for every one person that happened to, there's 1,000 more that live in the middle of the harshest realities in the United States of America. And all they have is government checks, small towns, alcohol, and drugs, just like the inner cities and the ghettos. It's sad. At any rate, if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like, share, and subscribe button. If you want to donate or learn more about Thunder Mountain, links to the website will be below. I am out.